Fintech Chatter, brought to you by Tier 1 People, leaders in Fintech executive search. Welcome to Fintech Chatter, the show where I connect with Fintech leaders for a bit of a chat. I'm your host, Dexter Cousins, and in today's show, I'm joined by Jeff Parker from Marqeta. Marqeta's modern card issuing platform empowers its customers to create customized and innovative payment cards. Marqeta's modern architecture gives its customers the ability to build flexible payment experiences, accelerating time to market and democratizing access to card issuing technology. Marqeta's open APIs provide instant access to highly scalable, cloud-based payment infrastructure that enables customers to launch and manage their own card programs, issue cards, and authorize and settle payment transactions. Marqeta is headquartered in Oakland, California, and is certified to operate in 39 countries globally. As SVP and Managing Director of International, Jeff is responsible for advancing the company's service offerings in its key markets across Europe and APAC. Jeff has over 20 years' experience in financial services across 4 continents in senior roles at Macquarie Bank, Aussie Fintech OG, OFX, and as CEO of Ant Financial's WorldFirst. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey Dexter, thanks for having me.
Mate, great to have you with us. Bit of a kind of roll call there of some big names in fintech. And of course, I think OFX was my very first fintech that I worked with in 2008. So it always has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, it's good to be talking to you. Brings me back to my days in Australia. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Well, look, as I mentioned there, I did a little intro on Marqeta. I'd love to do a bit of a deeper dive. Can you tell us a little bit more about the business and what they do?
Sure. As you said, it's a US headquartered fintech founded back in 2010. And really the premise is it was to kind of simplify the card issuing and processing kind of process. And it was, I guess it really created this new category called modern card issuing. And the premise is it's a B2B platform infrastructure play that allows some of the biggest and best names in tech to really build on top of our technology to provide amazing, innovative kind of customer experiences to their customer base. So, we've had some great success. I say we've got some of the biggest names in tech: Uber, Klarna, Afterpay, Zip, all using our platform. And we very much set up as a API first, developer first platform, which serves us really well, and through one single kind of global platform allows companies to integrate once and to launch in. It's actually 40 markets now around the world pretty seamlessly.
So it's an amazing business, but it's one of those businesses that is kind of flown under the radar. What I like to call the kind of pipes and plumbing, where it's most of the innovation happens in fintech. How did you kind of, I guess, first of all, come to find out about Marqeta and kind of what attracted you to the role that you've got?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think some of the most innovative and exciting players in fintech these days are the kind of the plumbing and the back technology, because it's really that's where a lot of the legacy complexity existed. I found out about Marqeta actually one of an employee that used to work for me at WorldFirst moved to Marqeta 4 or 5 years ago, and I started to follow them through that. And when I decided to move on from WorldFirst, I was looking for a business that was still in the fintech space. I thought was doing super innovative and exciting thing, operating in a big market, and had kind of global aspirations. And Marqeta kind of ticked all of those boxes. And I think what they've done in terms of brand awareness has really been kind of an example to others in the space.
Mm. And so your role as managing director of international, what does that actually entail?
Yeah, so I basically run everything outside of the Americas for Marqeta. Being a US headquartered business, that's where kind of the bulk of their revenue and growth has been. But we see a huge opportunity in taking kind of that core product and and taking it into new markets. So I'm about primarily moving into new markets, helping us to scale in those new markets, both acquiring new customers that need our capability, but also helping our US customers that want to go international. And then the other piece, I guess, to layer on top of that is understanding the nuances of localization. So while we really want to maintain this single kind of global platform, because that's an advantage, I think where some companies fail when they go global is they try and roll out the same cookie cutter model in different markets. And for Marqeta, it's very much about understanding the local needs of the customer and tailorizing or personalizing that as required in those markets.
Yeah, look, I find that a lot. Probably about 50% of our clients are internationals who are looking to launch here in Oz. And in the first conversation that I have with them, I think they go away and have a real good think about whether Oz is the right market for them. Because there is a lot of nuance. And I think people often look at the map and think, hey, it's a big place, but there's not, there's a lot of competition and there's not a huge market to compete in as well. What have you found with your kind of experience kind of internationally and some of the different markets that you've seen? How's that kind of lent itself to you then looking at, what would be the most viable markets?
Yeah, I mean, you raise an amazing point. I mean, Australia, I think, is a good example of, I think it's often seen as a test bed for some Western countries, companies going international. It's English speaking, got a relatively advanced kind of banking and payments infrastructure. But there's also some factors which make it hard. As you said, it's dominated by kind of a small number of banks. Regulation is quite tight. But I think from a Marqeta perspective, we're looking at a whole range of things. It's, what's the total addressable market? What's that competition look like? What's the kind of the incumbents look like? Is there a gap in the market that we think we can solve? And how best do we, or how well placed are we to actually execute? Because while you might have all of those other components, if we don't have the right skills within our organization to actually successfully execute, and that might be experience, it might be language, it might be some underlying cultures that you need to think through. So there's no secret sauce to this stuff. I think it's about common sense and kind of looking at a number of different factors and trying to prioritize and kind of hitting the go button and see how you go.
Yeah. So you mentioned some big names there. Now, some of them have found it pretty challenging, particularly the BNPL space has had some headwinds, incredible headwinds this last 12, 18 months. Has that had an impact on kind of the business? And have you had to look at maybe other areas and new markets and new types of businesses that you could offer the service to?
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a good level of diversification across industry segments. So we own the BNPL channel. We support Afterpay, Affirm, Zip, a bunch of Klarna. So we're very strong there. We're traditionally very strong in kind of the neobank and kind of fintech space. Very strong in expense management, on-demand delivery. We do Instacart and DoorDash. So we've got good diversification. Because we're a B2B player. Effectively, we're successful if our customers are successful. And interestingly, BNPL, you're exactly right. There's a huge amount of, I think, publicity around it at the moment. But and while I think there are some question marks around the business models and the sustainability of some of those business models, I think what's undisputed is that customers actually like the service which is provided by BNPL. And so the volumes going through that channel are actually still growing. And so from a Marqeta perspective, actually, we're still seeing a lot of volumes through that. But we are working very closely with, I guess, the industry and those players to make sure that we can continue to support them in the right way, and obviously watching the regulatory space with kind of keen interest.
So I don't know if you're planning to go to Money 2020 in Vegas this year, but I'm pretty sure the most heard word at that will be embedded finance. What do you kind of make of that space? And do you think that's a kind of really viable, I guess, opportunity for a business like Marqeta?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so definitely I will be going to May 2020. I was there in October. I'll be going to the Europe one in June, and then again in Vegas in October. Look, I think if you spoke to 100 people in fintech, 90 of them would say that embedded finance is kind of something that's got legs. I think the recent numbers are something like a $7 trillion market. We've just got a new CEO at Marqeta, and he's very clearly and publicly said that embedded finance is a key strategic focus for us. We think there's a huge opportunity to embed seamless payment experiences into the products and services of corporates. So it's definitely a space that we think we can have a meaningful part to play in. So we're very excited about that embedded finance opportunity.
Yeah. So you mentioned their new CEO coming in as well, taking over the reins from the kind of original founder. Maybe it's a good kind of segue into just giving us a little bit of context around the size and scale of Marqeta, and the number of transactions that you do and how big you are in terms of people, and kind of some of the revenue numbers as well, because it's pretty impressive, like the journey that the business has been on.
Sure. So I think we're a US listed business, so I have to kind of I'll play according to kind of what's been published, but we're about 1,000 people globally. The bulk of those are in the US. In the kind of the third quarter or last year, which is kind of to the end of September, we processed about $42 billion of transactions, which is just over a 50% increase on the prior year. And in the year to date, the 9 months to that end of September, we processed just under $120 billion kind of dollars of transactions, and a circa again a 50% increase on the prior year.
Yeah.
From a revenue perspective, I think we did just over 190 million in the third quarter last year, and just over $500 million in revenue for the kind of 9 months year to date. So continuing to show kind of strong growth around that. The market cap's just over $3 billion. So it really is a super hyper growth success story that is continuing to show product market fit. And we're in a really fortunate position that the customers really enjoy the services that we give them. And one of the biggest challenges we have is providing them with more. They want more from us. And so it's how do we keep up with the pace of what they want.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you're kind of working on around providing additional services, and what I guess interestingly, what's the feedback that you're getting from customers as to the things that they actually want to see and that they believe are problems that need to be fixed?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it changes a little bit by segment and by market. I think, as I said, it's a unique situation. I've never been at a company where I've spent the first kind of couple of months just meeting lots and lots of clients, and normally in those meetings, often they go to what you could do better and what things have gone wrong, and they use kind of the new kind of headers to kind of voice some complaints. But actually, all the meetings were super, super positive, telling me that they love Marqeta, they love what we stand for, they love the service they get, but they just want us to give them more, which is an amazing kind of foundation to build on. In terms of some of the things, we were the first company in the world that kind of tokenized kind of the issuance of a virtual card into the Apple and the Google Wallet through an app. We've just launched the ability to do that directly from the web. So no longer do you have to download a company's app to then put the card into your wallet. You can do it directly from a browser, which is super cool in terms of reducing some of the friction and the time to do that. We've just launched a really advanced kind of risk decisioning platform based on AI, which is in real time kind of learning around acceptance and decline rates, again, increasing the success rates for customers and reducing fraud. So there's a lot of stuff just in the core that we can do better. But outside of the core, I think, what we'll see over the next couple of years is that, up until now, we've been very much focused on prepaid and debit cards. The credit card is a stagnant product that hasn't really changed for 30 years. A couple of weeks ago, we announced the acquisition of a business called Powell, which is a credit card program manager. So we see a huge opportunity to really show innovation in the credit card space. And then I think we'll move beyond the card rails as well. So in the US, we announced Marqeta for banking last year, where we're starting to provide the issuance of bank accounts and account-to-account type payments, so that, I guess, in the theme of embedded finance, corporates that aren't experts in payments or fintech really are increasingly looking for this kind of one-stop shop that provide them with all of their needs in one location. So we're definitely looking to broaden, I guess, the sectors that we play in.
Mm. And in terms of their kind of sectors, where are you seeing that there's kind of maybe there's a demand for this? Because one of the things that I'm probably in the 10% who's a little wary of embedded finance. And it's really, I think, stems from, we were talking earlier about 2009 and the GFC, and seen a similar kind of push back then, but at the time it was typically white label platforms and products and partnerships between Woolies and HSBC, and they never delivered what they were kind of set out to deliver. I absolutely get, technology now has changed quite dramatically, and so a lot of those challenges now will probably not be as prevalent. But do you still see that the kind of, the Coles and the Woolies and the Tesco's of this world are going to go and down the embedded finance route, or do you think they'll kind of stick and try and do their own thing?
I mean, when we look at embedded finance, it's more in adding the payment experience or embedding that payment experience into everyday kind of use cases that you see. So, I mean, the first of some of those things was a buy now, pay later. So, what we do in real time when a customer goes to a checkout is we're issuing a virtual credit card in real time on behalf of Klarna, so that they can seamlessly make that transaction within the experience of the retailer. If you look at where that's going in the future, the automobile industry, for example, I think is ripe for embedding payment experience within the car, so where you can go and pay for fuel immediately through the in-car app, or you can order music from your screen, or you can pay for your car insurance within your car. I've got a friend who's just launched a business called Stored, which is trying to link the physical and the digital retail experience, and so that you can see something online, save it to your basket, and then you can walk into the store and you can take that link and automatically issue a card to purchase in store. So I think if you look at those types of use cases where it really is just taking the 2 or 3 steps out of the journey of having to open an app and potentially risk the transaction success dropping off, I think it's definitely got huge applications there. I think to your point, those traditional partnerships with supermarkets, and I don't see as much value in what that brings for customers.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I've never had anybody mention that thing about in-car, and I'm actually in the process of buying a new car, and one of the and it sounds really lame, right? But the in-car entertainment and dash was actually a key factor in what's its functionality like, because I get so frustrated with the thing, and it's probably quite dangerous, right? They crash. But I think that whole thing that you mentioned there about that convenience and being able to pay for fuel just from your car dash, it's just I can't believe nobody's mentioned that before.
And I think they're the types of things that it's evolution, not revolution in some ways. Like, to your point, we're not creating completely new experience. We're just making it easier for customers. And some of the stats around transaction drop-off rate. When I was at my previous role, and we were very much supporting marketplaces, many marketplaces would have a kind of north of a 50% drop-off rate from someone who clicked buy on a basket on an online, and then if they weren't able to pay with a card because it was more of a B2B transaction and they had to go and transfer the money from their own account, more than 50% of people would not go on and complete that transaction. So it's a frustration for the customer, it's a frustration for the business. So I think there's huge efficiencies and optimizations to be made through the thoughtful use of embedded finance.
Cool. Now, I wouldn't mind kind of switching the conversation a little bit, Jeff, and talking a bit more about kind of careers. I want to have a deeper chat with you about your career, but before we do that, how would you describe the culture at Marqeta, and what are some of the things that have really impressed you since you joined?
Hand on heart, I've been amazed in my I've only been at Marqeta since the end of September, so it's kind of 5 months. It's a super kind of collaborative, action-orientated kind of energetic culture, which has been very much driven from Jason Gardner, who was the kind of the founder and CEO. He has a phrase which is, he wants to create an environment that enables people to do the best work of their lives. And it very much kind of feels like that as an organization. There's lots of support for you. It's very much around innovation and allowing you to feel comfortable and safe to fail and fail fast, as long as you learn and drive forward. For a global business, we have during the pandemic, we actually moved to a 100% flexible first. So while we do have officers, there's no requirement for anyone to be in the office at all, and that's a permanent requirement. So every day we get photos of people that are out in the mountains working from there, or they're on holiday from Spain working from there, and so we've created that level of flexibility based through trust and autonomy, and I think that's really shown through in terms of the way we're able to attract and retain great talent.
It takes a really unique person that I've found to be able to operate and successfully that way and work successfully that way. Certain amount of discipline, high levels of accountability, and also the ability to be able to focus in isolation and work in isolation is pretty tough, right? Then collaborating in different time zones with, I'm telling you stuff we already know, right? But not everybody has those qualities. And also what's really interesting is when I look at your career, people who've made a similar move, so that move that you made from Macquarie to OFX, the data that I've collected over the last kind of 10 years shows that only 10% of people who make that move stay within fintech, stay with that organization more than 6 months. And then I think it's like, even, to actually still be in fintech at the point that you are now, most actually go back to a big bank environment. What would you say are the qualities that, you've had to kind of develop and kind of hone in on that have enabled you to have the career that you've had and still be here? What is it, 8 years later from leaving Macquarie, or 10 years later to now being, kind of your third fintech?
I didn't know those stats. It's an amazing stat. This is
just what I've collected, right? So I'm not saying that's across the board. This is just what I've collected over the years.
What it highlights, and I think is absolutely true, is that in my experience, and obviously everyone else is different, the environments are completely different. And I feel very fortunate that I got the grounding in some of those big corporates. I worked at some of the biggest banks, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Europe, Macquarie, which was amazing. I worked at Accenture.
I mentioned before we spoke, right? Macquarie was one of my clients, 2007, I think, through to 2012. And I've always admired the kind of entrepreneurial spirit, right? And back then, it still took a unique person to get hired at Macquarie. And it was corporate, but you still had to have that kind of get shit done mentality in that environment.
I think you're exactly right. And actually, if I look back on it, I think that experience in Macquarie was probably a nice bridge because that risk within, I think they call it risk within boundaries, is a kind of their key culture. It did allow an element of innovation within there. I think what's different about fintech, and you've got to be resilient. You've got to be not only able to deal with change, I think you've got to thrive in a fast-moving environment, which is change. I think because I'd been from that corporate background, I also had some of those kind of frameworks and ways to look at things. I had kind of a bit of a strategic mindset to be able to step back and kind of look at the bigger picture, but also kind of got in the weeds and the detail and was able to execute. And I think, in fintech, the amount of people that come to me and ask me for a really clear role description, my initial view is, I'm not sure fintech's for you, because I was a CEO in my last role, but I was still, in the weeds doing stuff day to day on some things. And I think you need that mindset. You have to learn to pivot. You have to look at the market moves very, very, very quickly. And so you spend all this time planning and doing your budgets. And when the saying is that, your budget's out of date the day after it's completed. Yeah. And I think that takes a certain mindset. For me personally, I don't think I'd ever be able to go back, because I just love the environment and the opportunities. Yeah. I love being in growth mode, which I know we're going to enter this time now of maybe a bit more uncertainty, but I still think the opportunities and the excitement in fintech are just outweigh that corporate. And finally for me, and this is very much an individual piece, is I really want to feel like I'm able to have an impact on an organization that I'm at. And I may prove to be a failure or not be successful, but I want to have died trying. Yeah. And I think unless you're right in that C-suite of those big organizations, you just can't have that impact, 40,000 people or 10,000. And that's the bit I love about fintech is knowing that the decisions that I make, the decisions that our teams make, that we make together, really can kind of make a difference to the future.
Yeah, awesome. I was chuckling there when you mentioned the thing about the job description, because that's actually one of my criteria on assessing candidates. If they ask for a job description, I know that they're not the right person. It's so true, right? Because even if I had one, it's going to change within the first couple of months anyway. And so you just have to, kind of be able to deal with that and just move with it. And it's such a great point, Jeff.
And that's at all levels. So, I mean, the CEO of Marqeta, he was hired a year ago as a chief product officer. Within a month, he'd been made the chief revenue officer, and then 6 months later, as the CEO. So, it's not just at the junior levels; it happens all the way through, and you have to thrive and enjoy that kind of ambiguity.
Yeah, look, we get lots of people who are working in banks and the big consulting firms who listen to this show and know they've got aspirations of moving to fintech. What would be some of the tips that you would share or advice that you'd share to those people on what they kind of need to prepare for and how they could potentially prepare for making that switch?
I mean, I think first of all, I'd say go for it. I mean, I think I've just loved kind of the exposure that you get within fintech. You're effectively at the leading edge of technology and what's kind of changing and understanding what customers want and being able to kind of adapt and be agile and respond quickly. And all of those things to me are exciting. But in terms of the qualities, in addition to, I think, some of those things we just mentioned around resilience, being able to do with change, I think you need to be decisive. You need to be willing to kind of make decisions. You need to show initiative. People always talk to me about the stages of successful people and problems. And, at one end, it's, you don't even realize it's an issue. And, you get to the point of, there's a problem, but you raise the issue without a solution. And right at the far end, it's, you don't even tell anyone about the problem. You tell them that you've actually resolved it and delivered the solution. And I think fintech is very much like that, because you wear multiple hats at the same time. And I think what's really valued by founders or leaders in those scaling businesses is people that they can really trust to get shit done, as you said, take accountability, run with it, pull people together and solve problems. And I always go by the kind of the motto that a bad decision is better than no decision. Learn from it and move forward. I think that's very true in the fintech space.
So that stat that I shared with you before about only 10% of people working out, the 90% why they failed, unanimously when I've interviewed CEOs, founders, as to why people didn't work out coming from that big kind of corporate environment, is exactly what you said. They made a mistake and they either kind of, didn't ask for help or just couldn't deal with it and couldn't deal with the stress, or they hid it and tried to blame somebody else for the mistake that they'd made. Both of those are kind of just, the cardinal sins in that environment, and there's no way back from it. And I think it's one of the things that's just really difficult for people to get their head around, because that's kind of just the way you get ahead in a corporate, right? Even corporates with a good culture, right? It's like, that's just the game, and it's kind of ingrained in you. So it's great that you've brought that up, because I've been saying this to people for a long time. I've probably said this 4 or 5 times on the podcast now. So to have somebody who's actually experienced that from the other side, just great to kind of get that validation as well.
There's a couple of things actually, you raised some really good points. I think there's a couple of things that I think are really important in from my experiences. One is ruthless prioritization, and the other one is radical transparency. And I think the great thing about fintech, but also the challenge of fintech, is there's so many opportunities. Even just, if I take Marqeta for an example, we could go down so many different avenues, but you can't be all things to all people. Yeah. And so you have to decide what you're good at. And I think Marqeta's done an amazing job at being the category leader at modern card issuing and processing. And that's what they've done for 10 years, and they've built their name on it, and they'll never forget that. Yes, they can expand, but they didn't kind of diversify too quickly. And I think the transparency thing, to your point, is exactly right. We're all going to make mistakes. The winners are those that make those mistakes and learn from them the quickest, and move forward. And if you're not transparent and doing that trust, very hard to do that.
And I think this is kind of the other difference between the two environments, right? In a big corporate environment, you get punished for making a mistake, whether that's your bonus or you don't get a promotion. Whereas in a fintech environment, you don't get punished for making mistakes as long as you learn from them and correct them and work hard and you're accountable. It's considered that, hey, that's just part of the learning process. And I think that's kind of, again, it's almost like when you're under stress, you're trying to learn something new, an environment where you said, right, like it's moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. To keep up pace with that, you feel like you're completely lost it many times. And I think what happens is the fight or flight response kicks in for a lot of people who've been in that environment, and they sense danger, and it's like, oh shit, I'd best kind of hide this, or what if somebody finds out, or how am I going to explain this? And they're things that you don't have to be fearful of in a fintech environment.
I don't want to kind of give people the false impression that, and punish is the wrong word, but you have to learn. Because it's moving so quickly, you're expected to not make that same mistake again. Yeah. And you're expected to evolve, but you're 100%, the ideal scenario is you're creating a safe environment for people to do that kind of test, learn, and iterate. I think the other thing is, fintech has this t-shirt, hoodies, jeans kind of perception, but people work damn hard in fintech as well. And I think it's not a 9-to-5 mentality, and these founders are successful because they are not workaholics in all cases, but they are really passionate about what they do, and they go above and beyond to be successful. And I think that's another, I guess probably criteria for how to be successful. And that feeling that you mentioned about being overwhelmed with things because things are just moving too quickly or something's gone wrong is a common feeling in, I think, or at least in my experience, in fintech. But it's how you deal with that, and is it fight or flight, which is the response, which is important.
Yeah. Now I want to talk a little bit, Jeff, around the experiences that you've had recently as well. Well, I say recently over your career, which has been global, but I guess more recently in the context of WorldFirst, Ant Financial acquired you. You're based in Asia, based in Europe. You kind of, you've seen two of the kind of biggest fintech centers, where a lot of the innovation's happening. What has got you excited or most excited about fintech right now from the things that you've seen over this last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I have been, extremely lucky to have worked across a number of continents, and interestingly, I think in that space, to your point, I was actually thinking about this when I was joining Marqeta, is that I was kind of having worked for an Aussie fintech, a UK fintech, a Chinese fintech, and now a US fintech was kind of amazing experience for me.
Should be a diplomat.
I definitely learned a lot of stakeholder management when I was working for Ant. I think there's so much going on in fintech at the moment. I think if you look back on kind of previous times of economic uncertainty. You're right, 2008, the dot-com boom in 2000. And I think we're kind of entering into another kind of period of some uncertainty. Actually, it's those kind of pinch points where actually the most innovation happens. So while we've seen a lot in the last 10 years, I actually think we could be seeing, we'll see an acceleration over the next kind of couple of years. And I think it's some of the stronger organizations, come out of those times really flying. I mean, what are we seeing? I mean, I think we've talked a bit about embedded finance. I think there's a huge amount of scope to do more. I think jumping on the bandwagon, I think we're probably reaching that inflection point with the effectiveness and use cases around AI. We've seen with ChatGPT. I think it's been around for a lot. I think there's huge opportunity within financial services and fintech to leverage that. So we've just launched around risk, a decision-making tool which is leveraging AI significantly, and we're seeing great results. And that whole onboarding, compliance, risk management, I think has massive digital identity. I think big use cases. Yeah. And then I think we're starting to see, I don't know what to call it under BAS, but I think this kind of aggregation of services. I think if you look at, or my perception of fintech is that it started with the disaggregation of a bunch of, people looked at the legacy services that were provided by incumbent banks, etc., and they said, right, I can do this portion of it better, whether that's onboarding or whether that's cross-border payments. And we got really deep, narrow segments of fintechs. What I think we're now seeing is either those fintechs have been really successful and they want to do more, or that fintechs haven't been able to prove the sustainable, profitable business model in that niche, and so they need to do more. Yeah. And so we're actually starting to see almost the reaggregation of some of those products and services. So I actually think over the next 2 to 3 years, we'll start to see some of those successful fintechs really kind of bolting that together. And I think potentially starting to challenge much more successful than they have some of those incumbents. We're starting to see, Monzo and Revolut, I think, really kind of gain traction in the UK market, and we'll start to see that replicated in other markets, I think. Yeah.
To your point as well, about those down periods and them often being the moments of, kind of the greatest innovation points. I absolutely agree, right? And I've recruited through the dot-com crash, I recruited through the GFC, and have seen that play out. I'm really hopeful that what we see kind of happen this time around is that the innovation that we've seen in fintech so far extends beyond what you pointed out, which was, let's just make this part of the service, better UX, more efficient, cheaper to do. And we actually see a switch with, and I think this is where AI really does come into it. We start to see products that are tailor-made for customers rather than, hey, we've kind of fixed the delivery bit, but it's still the same product that we had 50 years ago, and it's probably not suitable for, the life that we live now. So I'm hopeful that I think we'll see that. And, to your point, seeing very similar things around AI, particularly around risk and credit pricing. And actually, how do we now kind of take an individual's data and create a product specifically for them?
I mean, you're 100% right. I mean, as much as the advancement, we've made advancements over the last few years, I still feel that you've got a very homogenized product in many cases. And if you just look at things like targeted search and marketing, et cetera, it still feels like spam to me. Yeah. I don't get tailored, personalized, really valuable kind of nuggets of information which are going to make my decision-making process more effective or are going to make my experiences better. I think, exactly to your point, that's where we need to get to. And that's what I think we will start to see over the next few years. I'm an advisor to Stake, one of the Aussie.
Dan well. Had Dan on the show a few months ago.
And I think, that's a phenomenal business. And, what they're doing, I think, you can really see how they can take some of this stuff to elevate even further. I think they've already got a best-in-class product, but if they can take some of that kind of personalization and data to really magnify or improve the kind of the investment options and experiences they have, amazing kind of benefits you actually deliver for customers.
Awesome. One of the cool things about doing this podcast now for 3 years is I get lots of feedback from people who've, mentioned an episode that's inspired them to start a business or has inspired them to move into fintech, or they loved the business and they reached out to the founder and they actually hired them. So the kind of, the power of podcasts is something that I've come to kind of experience firsthand is a real thing. So what I'm doing this year is every guest that we have on is asking them which podcasts they listen to, where they go for inspiration. Ideally one fintech and one that's anything else that you're listening to that you'd like to share with our guests.
Well, good question. So there's a couple. I listen to quite a lot of podcasts. I cycle a lot and often listen to them when I'm cycling. But on the fintech ones, one of the obvious ones I think is probably one of the biggest ones is Fintech Insider, the 11FS one. I really, really like. But I also listen to Fintech Daydreaming, which is a much smaller one out of the Nordics, which is quite interesting.
I'm actually recording a session with the guys tomorrow night.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then on the non-fintech side, I listen to Peter Croucher's Football One, just as a social one, which is pretty good. And actually, I quite like Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO.
Yeah,
I listen to every now and then. So they're probably my go-to ones.
Yeah.
There's a few of those, but I think they're probably the key ones I listen to.
Awesome. And actually, David Breer is going to be a guest as well. I think we're recording that show next Wednesday. So if anybody's listening to this, they've got any questions that they want me to ask David, make sure you send me an email. Well, Jeff, it's been fantastic to catch up with you. Before we finish, what else can we expect from Marqeta in 2023? I think
as I kind of touched on, diving a lot deeper into credit and expanding into the credit space overseas. Continuing to look at new market expansion, already covering kind of 40 countries, and taking a lot of what we do in the US into new markets, and really deepening that product service. And I think ultimately not forgetting what our kind of bread and butter is. And, we think we're that kind of core leader in issuer processing, and we'll continue to do that to the best of our abilities to meet and exceed our customers' expectation and needs, but super, super exciting future from my perspective for Marqeta. So, and thanks very much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome. It's been awesome. And finally, before we wrap up, we get loads of founders and execs listening to this show. If they're interested in the Marqeta solution, what's the best way for them to reach out and find out more?
So our website is www.marqeta.com. Feel free to reach out to me personally at jparker@marqeta.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, easy as Jeff Parker. So any of those, feel free to reach out and I'll be in touch very quickly.
Great. And we also get incredible talent listening to this podcast. If there's anybody out there who's potentially interested in careers at Marqeta, where's the best place for them to go?
We do have an office, a small team in Australia led by Duncan Curry.
Big shout out to Duncan and all my friends there.
Good. So if you just go to the website, there's a careers page on the website. We are in a very fortunate position where we're still hiring in this in current environment. We've got people in the UK, Australia. We just opened in Singapore, and obviously the US. So they're kind of our key employee locations at the moment.
Great. Well, Jeff, it's been fantastic to chat. I promise I won't leave it 5 years next time.
Thanks very much. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for tuning in. You can connect with me, as always, on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're new to the show, make sure you give us a follow on your favorite podcast player. And if you're feeling in extra special mood, please leave us a 5-star review, as it really helps us connect other fintech fans to the show. You can also support us by heading on over to our YouTube channel, Fintech Chatter TV. And Fintech Chatter is in the top 5% of shared shows on Spotify. So if there's anybody else that you think would benefit from listening to the show, then remember, sharing is caring. Until the next episode, keep well. Fintech Chatter is presented by Tier 1 People, leaders in fintech executive search. We'll help you find world-class fintech leadership talent to build world-class fintech ventures. And you can find out more at tier1people.com.